皆様、今日は8月9日、
Ladies and
長崎
gentlemen,
に原爆が投下され
today
てか
is
ら
August
76
9th.
年目を
On
迎え
this
ます。
day, 76 years ago, an atomic bomb
私た
was
ちは
dropped
原
on
爆で亡く
Nagasaki.
なられた多くの方
To
々の
pray
ご冥
for the
福を祈り、
repose of the deceased
今なお
atomic
交
bomb
渉外で苦
victims
しみ続けてい
and
る被
console
爆者
the
の方々を
survivors who
励
are
ますため
still
に、
suffering from the agony
そ
of
し
the
て
after
核兵器
effects
のない平和
and
な世界
to
が実
show
現され
our
ることを
strong
心から
commitment
願って、
towards realization of a
国の内
peaceful
外から
world
お越し
free
の
of
皆様の
nuclear
参列を
weapons.
もとに、
We now begin the
ただいまから
76th
被爆76
Nagasaki
周年
peace ceremony
長崎
in the
原
presence
爆
of the
犠牲者
attendees
慰霊
who
平和
have
祈念式典
gathered
を
from
行います。
both inside and outside of Japan.
私は長崎県立長崎工業高
I
等
am
学校
Shiota
3年の
Ayato,
塩
the
田
third
彩
year
です。
student at Nagasaki Prefectural Nagasaki Technical High School.
I'm
I'm Sato Yuri, the second year student at the same high
長
school,
崎の平和への願いを受け継いでいく
representing the young
若い世代の一
generation
員と
who
し
will
て、
inherit
今日は
Nagasaki's
これから
pursuit of
二人で
peace.
式典の進
We
行を
are
させていただ
honored
きま
to
す。
serve as masters of ceremony today. Now the bell of Nagasaki is ringing, sending out our desire for world peace. The list of the names of Hibakusha or atomic bomb victims who have passed away during this past year will be placed in the cenotaph by 3 people: Arita Kunihiro, representing the bereaved families, Tsujita Fukuko, representing the survivors, and the mayor of Nagasaki City.
ただいま奉安しています
The
原爆
list
死没
being
者名簿に
placed
は
in the cenotaph now
3202
contains
人
the
の名前が
name
記され
of
ています
3,202
昨年までに
people.
奉安いたしました方
Together
々を合わ
with
せ
the
ますと
other deceased victims whose names were placed in the cenotaph until last year, it brings the total number of the deceased to 189,163.
Opening address. Chairman of Nagasaki City Council. Opening address. Today, at the 76th Nagasaki peace ceremony, with the attendance of Prime Minister Suga, our esteemed guests, atomic bomb survivors, bereaved families, and citizens of Nagasaki, I would like to begin by expressing my deepest condolences for those lost in the atomic bombing.
御霊に慎んで哀悼の誠を捧げます。76年前の8月
A single atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki on August 9th, 76 years ago.
一瞬にして破壊し、
It instantly devastated the city,
命を奪い、
took
たくさんの
many
人
precious
々の
lives,
心と体に生涯
and left many
癒えぬ
others
傷跡
with
を残し
physical
ました。
and mental scars
それか
that
ら
would never
私
heal.
たち長崎
Since
市
then,
民は
We,
人類が
the people of
二度と
Nagasaki,
同じ過
have
ちを繰り
continued
返さぬ
to
よう
speak out
長崎を
that
最後の
Nagasaki
被爆地に
must be the
と
last
伝え
site
続
of
け
an
てい
atomic
ます
bombing, so that
今年
humanity
1
would
月
never make that
長
same
崎
mistake
広島
again.
の被爆者をはじ
In
め
January of
核
this
兵器
year,
の廃絶
the
を
wishes of the
願う
atomic
人々
bomb
の思いが
survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as well as the people who wished for the abolition of nuclear weapons, came to fruition, and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, entered into force.
新たなスタ
Taking
ート
this
として
moment, where the world
私
has
たち
made
は
such a
引き
great
続
leap
き核兵器
forward
廃絶
as a
の
new start,
取り組みを
we
進
vow
め
to
ていくこ
continue
と
to
を
work
ここに
towards
誓
the
います
abolition of nuclear
世
weapons.
界を混乱に陥れている新型
Due
コ
to
ロ
the
ナウイルス感染
COVID-19
症の
pandemic
影
that has
響により
plunged the world in
昨年
chaos,
開催が予定されていた核
the
不拡
review
散条約
conference of the parties to the
NPT
treaty
再検討
on the
会議は
Non-Proliferation
延期
of nuclear
今
weapons
年度の開
NPT
催が
that was
検
planned
討
for
され
last
てい
year
ます
was postponed.
核兵
Its
器
holding
禁
during
止
this
条約
fiscal
と
year is under
NPT は
consideration.
相反するのではないか
Some say
との
that
声
the
もありますが
TPNW and the
私たち
NPT
が
contradict each other,
核兵器の
but
ない世界を
I believe
将来実
that
現
they
するた
are
めには
complementary forces to realize a world without nuclear weapons for which we
各国
wish.
が自国の利害を乗り越えて
I hope that every country will set aside their own interests
全ての
and
人類
movement
の
towards the
安全保障へ
establishment
と
of a security
向かう
of all
流れが生ま
humanity
れることを
that is
願い
based on
ます
international cooperation and trust will be
長崎市議会は
born.
日本
The
政府に対
Nagasaki
し
City Council
核兵器禁止条約
submitted
の
a written opinion to the Japanese government in January, asking it to participate as an observer at the meeting of states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons.
唯一戦争で被爆をした
We
我が国
sincerely
が
urge
我が
that
国
Japan
こそが
act as a liaison between the nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states as the only country in human history that had suffered atomic
本
bombings
日
during
の
the
式
war.
典にあたり
In closing, I pray that those who were lost to the atomic bomb may rest in peace. And I pray for the good health of all the atomic bomb survivors and bereaved families. Inoue Shigehisa, Nagasaki City Council Chairman, August 9th, 2021.
Water offering.
A water tribute is being offered for the souls of the deceased atomic bomb victims. On this day, 76 years ago, Hibakusha, who suffered severe burns all over, even inside the body, died, seeking water to drink, crying, "Water, water." This holy water that is offered now is collected by survivors from the springs located in the four respective locations of north, south, west, and east in Nagasaki City, namely Adakobo Okunoi in Ebira, Nishimachi, Nishiyama, and Mikiyama, as well as from Fountain of Peace. The water tribute is offered by Toyofuku Sumiko, representing the bereaved families, Okumura Eiji, representing Hibakusha, Yamasaki Sakura, representing high school students, Takahashi Hime, representing junior high school students, and Tanaka Tomoaki, representing primary school children. Offering of flowers. Floral tribute is offered by Egashira Reiko, representing bereaved family, Kuramori Terumi, representing Hibakusha, Mayor of Nagasaki City, and the Speaker of Nagasaki City Council. The distinguished guests are now invited to offer flowers. Mr. Suga Yoshihide, Prime Minister of Japan. Mr. Oshima Tadamori, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Mr. Ogawa Toshio, the Vice President of the House of Councillors. Mr. Washio Eiichiro, the Parliamentary Senior Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, on behalf of the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Mr. Tamura Norihisa, Minister of Health, Labor and Welfare. Mr. Yamaguchi Tsuyoshi, representing the Liberal Democratic Party. Mr. Edano Yukio, representing the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan. Mr. Yamaguchi Natsuo, representing Komeito Party. Mr. Azuma Toru, representing Japan Innovation Party. Mr. Koike Akira, representing Japan Communist Party. Mr. Tamaki Yuichiro, representing Democratic Party for the People. Ms. Fukushima Mizuho, representing the Social Democratic Party. Ms. Nakamitsu Izumi, the United Nations Under-Secretary General and representative for disarmament. Mr. Nakamura Hodo, Governor of Nagasaki. Mr. Sakamoto Tomonori, the Speaker of Nagasaki Prefectural Assembly.
広島市長松井和美様、
Mr.
広島市議会議長
Mayor
山田
of
春夫様、
Hiroshima City.
広島市被爆者
Mr.
代
Yamada
表野村
Haruo,
明子様、
Speaker of Hiroshima City Council. Ms. Nomura Akiko,
原爆
representing
死没者
Hibakusha
全国
in
遺族代
Hiroshima
表
City.
加藤麻太郎様、
Mr. Kato Asataro and Ms. Uematsu Itsuko, representing bereaved families of deceased Hibakusha in Japan. Mr. Regis Sabio, Head of Delegation in Japan International
アラブ首
Committee
長
of
国
the
連
Red
邦
Cross.
特命全権大使
His
シハブ・アハマ
Excellency
ド・アル・パティーム
Mr.
様、
Shihab Ahmed Al Fahim,
ハイチ共和国
Ambassador
特命
of the
全権
United
大使
Arab
エルフ・モノ
Emirates
ド・
to
オノラ
Japan.
様、
His Excellency Mr. Elf Monodo
チェコ共和
Honora,
国
Ambassador
特
of
命
the
全権大使
Republic
マ
of
ルチン・ト
Haiti
ムチ
to
ョ様、
Japan. His Excellency Mr. Martin
ベナン
Tomcho,
共和国特命
Ambassador
全
of
権大
Czech
使
Republic
マカリミ・
to
アビソラ・ア
Japan.
デチブ様、
His Excellency Mr. Makarim Abisola Adichuv, Ambassador of Republic of Benin to Japan.
続いて式典参列者代表の方々
Now
の
we
献花をお願いい
invite
たし
the
ます。
representatives of attending organizations to offer floral tributes.
まもなく11時2分です。
It is almost 2 minutes past 11. We will pause for a moment of silent prayer for the souls of the atomic bomb victims and for world peace. Ladies and gentlemen, you are kindly requested to rise. Silent prayer.
.黙祷終わります。ご着席ください。
You may be seated. Nagasaki Peace Declaration. The mayor of Nagasaki City will deliver the peace declaration to the world. The declaration will be sent to the heads of all UN member states and to the local government bodies in Japan. The declaration will also be transmitted to the world via the internet. The Nagasaki Peace Declaration. This year saw the passing of a Catholic monk. Ozaki Tome spent his whole life following in the footsteps of Father Maximilian Kolbe, the man who was called the Saint of Auschwitz. Brother Ozaki spoke out about his experiences in the atomic bombings up until just before his life came to a close at the age of 93. In his diary, he left behind these words. The countries of the world, all of them, must completely abolish nuclear weapons, or there will be no peace on earth. Nuclear weapons are not conventional bombs. Only those who experience the atomic bombings can understand the terror inherent in radiation. Parents, children, loved ones, and many others were killed by these bombs. In order to see that they are not used again, I keep saying, "This is wrong. This is wrong." I keep screaming for the abolition of nuclear weapons. Those of us who survived the hell of the atomic bombings want to make sure that we have peace without nuclear weapons before we die. The peace without nuclear weapons that Brother Ozaki continued to call for has not as yet been realized. However, the wish he had has borne fruit in the form of a certain treaty. This year marks the 76th year since humankind experienced the tragedy of the atomic bombings, and we are now standing on a new horizon with regard to nuclear weapons. When the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons came into force this January, it was the first time in human history that there had been an international law clearly stating that nuclear weapons are unequivocally illegal. The process to make this newly established treaty grow into a universal rule for the world and realize a world free of nuclear weapons will now begin. The point of departure will be the first meeting of state parties to the treaty, which will be held next year. Conversely, however, the danger of nuclear weapons continues to grow. While the nuclear-armed nations have a responsibility to uphold the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, and reduce nuclear weapons, moves such as the public announcement by the UK about increasing the number of nuclear warheads in the country show that dependence on such weapons is actually increasing. Furthermore, the competition to replace existing nuclear weapons with more sophisticated weapons and develop new types of nuclear weapons increases. In order to follow a single path toward a world free of nuclear weapons amidst these two conflicting movements, world leaders must commit to nuclear arms reductions and build trust through dialogue, and civil society must push them in this direction. I hereby appeal to the government of Japan and members of the National Diet. As the country that is most aware of the tragic consequences of nuclear weapons, please join as an observer to the first meeting of state parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in order to look into ways to develop this treaty. With regard to the stipulation in the treaty to provide assistance to victims of the use of testing of nuclear weapons, surely this is an area where Japan and its government can contribute more than any other country. In addition, please sign the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and see to its ratification at the earliest possible date. While adhering to the war-renouncing principle of peace in the Japanese Constitution, please look into building a nuclear weapon-free zone in Northeast Asia that would create a non-nuclear umbrella instead of a nuclear umbrella, and be a step in the direction of a world free of nuclear weapons. I hereby appeal to the leaders of nuclear-armed nations and countries under these nuclear umbrellas. You must face the reality that thinking of nuclear weapons as necessary to defend your countries under nuclear deterrence actually makes the world a more dangerous place. I ask you to see that substantial progress towards nuclear disarmament is made at the next NPT review conference, starting with greater steps by the US and Russia to reduce nuclear weapons. To everyone living on this earth, due to the coronavirus pandemic, we have experienced on a global scale the loss of everyday aspects of our lives that we previously took for granted. We have learned that in order to overcome this crisis, it is necessary for each and every one of us to think of ourselves as concerned parties and act appropriately. Now, we all ponder together the question of how we can build an even better future when the pandemic is over, instead of just returning to the way things were before. It is the same with nuclear weapons. Are we members of the human race going to choose a future in which we continue to maintain nuclear weapons that will pollute the earth and doom humanity? Hasn't the time come for us to raise our individual voices, as is being done in the movements for decarbonization and sustainable development goals, and speak out against the dangers inherently in nuclear weapons in order to bring about change in the world? May Nagasaki be the last place to suffer an atomic bombing. These words are sent from Nagasaki to people all over the world. Hiroshima will eternally be remembered in history as the first place to suffer an atomic bombing. But whether Nagasaki continues to take its place in history as the last place to suffer an atomic bombing depends on the future we build for ourselves. The unchanging resolve of the hibakusha to see that no one in the world ever goes through that experience again is expressed in these words, as is the goal clearly stated in the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. It is a hope that each and every one of us should continue to hold on to. Let us share these words with the people of the world and follow a clear path towards a nuclear-free world over a 25-year period that begins this year and bring us to the 100th anniversary of the atomic bombings. While joining forces with young people of the last generation to directly hear the voices of the hibakusha, Nagasaki will continue to communicate the truth about what happened 76 years ago, facts that must never be forgotten. The average age of hibakusha is now over 83. I ask that the government of Japan provides improved support for the hibakusha and relief measures for those who experienced the atomic bombings but have not yet received official recognition as bombing survivors. 10 years have now passed since the Great East Japan earthquake and its aftermath. We will not forget what happened in Fukushima. We extend from the bottom of our hearts a call for encouragement to all those in Fukushima who continue to face a variety of hardships. While extending our deepest condolences to those who lost their lives to the atomic bombs, I hereby declare that Nagasaki will work tirelessly alongside Hiroshima and all people who desire peace to spread a culture of peace around the world and bring about the abolishment of nuclear weapons and the realization of eternal peace. Taue Tobihisa, Mayor of Nagasaki, August 9, 2021.
Pledge for Peace. Oka Nobuko, representing the hibakusha, will deliver the Pledge for Peace. Pledge for peace. My 93rd summer has come in my hometown of Nagasaki. Since 76 years ago, the Nagasaki summers that I used to love so much have changed. Even though we were poor during the war, life was enjoyable. However, the atomic bomb took even that away from me. At that time, I was 16 years old and a student at the Osaka First Army Hospital, Osaka Japanese Red Cross Nursing School. The hospital was hit in the bombing of Osaka, so I returned home to Nagasaki in August. In Nagasaki, Japanese Red Cross nurses were being dispatched to army and naval hospitals around Japan and abroad. We nursing students were on standby at home. On August 9th, I was hit by the atomic bomb while at my home in what is today Sumiyoshi-machi, and sustained injuries to the left half of my body from the blast winds of the bomb. 3 days after the bombing, I received a telegram that said, "Show up for aid duty," from the Nagasaki prefectural branch of the Japanese Red Cross. And I was mobilized to the Shinkozen First Aid Station. I was still only a nursing student, so I aided the victims as I learned by watching from the other nurses and combat medics. One after another, victims of the bombing were carried into the 3-story first aid station, and the second and the third floors filled up very fast. There were so many dead. We would put the bodies on boards, and 2 women would carry them to the playground, where men would then throw them into the backs of large trucks like they were piling up lumber. Some bodies were carried to the autopsy room. I saw one body that was covered with maggots from the chest to the abdomen, and I nearly ran away. But a combat medic yelled at me, "You call yourself a rescue worker?" which brought me back to my senses, and I powered through. As I tended to the victims without sleep or rest, I began to worry about my father, whose whereabouts I did not know. The injuries that I had on my legs were also infested with maggots, and it felt like my legs were being drilled by gimlets. Bearing this pain, I searched for my father. From early in the morning, I walked unclear paths covered with rubble and the dead bodies of people and horses to search for him at the first aid stations until it got dark, at which point I would return to the Shinkozen First Aid Station. I did this over and over again. After a week, I finally found my father, who was badly injured at Togitsu National School First Aid Station. "Father, you are alive. I searched for you with all the strength I had." I cried as I hugged him. In my search for my father, I saw a man standing dizzily while holding with both hands his entrails which were coming out of his abdomen. I saw a charred person with only one leg leaning against a wall. And I saw a young mother trying to give her baby, whose head had been ripped off, its final suckle of milk. At the Michino first aid station, a boy who was carrying his small little brother on his back approached me. He asked, "Can you please buy me a train ticket?" "Where are you going to go?" I asked him. And he mentioned that his father had died and said, "I want to go to Isahaya or Omura to look for my mother." These two boys, younger than me, were looking for their mother, whose whereabouts they did not know. I thought about those little boys while treating the victims, and I got a lump in my throat. In January of this year, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons entered into force, which was a long-held wish for the atomic bomb survivors. I believe this is due to the small voices of every single person calling out for the abolition of nuclear weapons becoming one large global voice, and the younger generation carrying on our will. Currently, I am requested by colleges to recount my story of the atomic bombing. As long as we Hibakusha are alive, we vow to relay our experiences and to appeal for peace and the abolition of nuclear weapons. Oka Nobuko, Atomic Bomb Survivor Representative, August 9th, 2021. Children's chorus. The song Souls of Children will now be sung by children's choral group. The Shiroyama Elementary School, located close to the hypocenter, was obliterated in an instant by the atomic bomb. This song was composed as a memorial to the bygone days of teachers and children who died in the atomic bombing, with a prayer for the eternal repose of their souls and peace. This song has been passed on through the years in the school. Today, 5th and 6th graders will sing.
Nagasaki に原子爆弾が落とされてから76回目の夏を迎えました。私たちの通う城山小学校でもたくさんの先生方、そして子どもたちが尊い命を失いました。この歌は城山小学校で学ぶ私たちの平和への願いであり誓いであります。また平和への発信でもあります。先生よ、
子らの御霊よ安らぎて永遠に増しませ。
Honored guests are now invited to make an address. Mr. Suga Yoshihide, Prime Minister of Japan. Today, at the opening of the Nagasaki peace ceremony on the 76th anniversary of the atomic bombing, I reverently express my sincere condolences to the many souls of the great number of atomic bomb victims. I also extend my heartfelt sympathy to those still suffering even now from the after effects of the atomic bomb. The world is still facing the challenge of COVID-19 infection and continues to struggle to overcome this challenge. In Japan, too, the infection continues to spread throughout the country, but we will do our best to overcome this infection and bring back the safe and lively aspects of daily lives of people as early as possible. 76 years ago this day, an atomic bomb turned this city into scorched earth in an instant. However, thanks to the extraordinary efforts of the citizens since then, Nagasaki has risen from the ashes and has achieved a remarkable recovery as a cosmopolitan cultural city that symbolizes peace and culture. The beautiful recovery of this city reminded us once again that there are no insurmountable challenges and made us keenly feel the preciousness of peace. Last year was the 75th anniversary of the atomic bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Shortly after taking office, I was at the United Nations General Assembly and sent out a message to the world stating, "Tragedy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki must never be repeated." With this determination in mind, Japan will adhere to its 3 non-nuclear principles and do its utmost to realize a world without nuclear weapons. As the only country that has suffered atomic bombings during war, it is our unchanging mission to steadily advance the efforts of the international community step by step towards the realization of a world free of nuclear weapons. The international security environment in recent years has been severe, and there's a gap between the positions of various countries on how to proceed with nuclear disarmament. Under these circumstances, it is necessary for countries to remove mistrust through engagement and dialogue and to redouble their efforts to form a common ground. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is joined by 191 countries and territories, including both nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states. It is the cornerstone of the international nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. In order to achieve a meaningful outcome at the next NPT review conference, the government of Japan will continue to make persistent efforts to find concrete measures that can serve as a common ground for each country to work on, utilizing the results of the discussions at the group of eminent persons for substantive advancement of nuclear disarmament. As hibakusha continue to age, it is becoming increasingly important to disseminate the reality of the atomic bombing across generations and borders. Japan is determined to continue its effort to pass on the memory of the tragic consequences of the use of nuclear weapons in cooperation with the hibakusha. We will continue to promote comprehensive relief measures for the hibakusha, taking into account their need for support in the areas of health, medical care, and welfare, and staying close to the hibakusha as they continue to advance in age. In particular, we will make every effort to expedite the screening process of atomic bomb diseases as much as possible. Here, in the city of Nagasaki, that never ceases to pray for eternal peace, I pledge to do my utmost towards the realization of a world free of nuclear weapons and lasting peace. In closing, I offer my prayers for the peaceful repose of the souls of the victims of the atomic bombing, and pray for the peace of the bereaved families, the hibakusha, everyone in attendance, and the people of Nagasaki. Suga Yoshihide, Prime Minister of Japan, August 9, 2021.
The United Nations Under Secretary General and Representative for Disarmament, Ms. Nakamitsu Izumi. I'm going to read the UN Secretary General message. Excellencies, brave hibakusha, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to send this message to the Nagasaki Peace Memorial 76 years after an atomic bomb unleashed a catastrophe in this vibrant city.
犠牲になられた方々に謹んで哀悼の誠を捧げます。被爆者の方々の指針のない行いに
I continue to be humbled by the selfless acts of the hibakusha. Your courage in the face of immense human tragedy is a beacon of hope for humanity. Thank you for continuing to spread your powerful testimony. Your efforts have helped to build a powerful global movement against nuclear arms based on the knowledge that a single blinding explosion can produce incalculable suffering that echoes down the generations. I reaffirm the full support of the United Nations to ensuring that your voices are heard by the world's people and especially by younger generations. To the people of Nagasaki, you have built a cultural metropolis out of the ashes of nuclear war. Your dynamic city exemplifies modernity and progress, while you work diligently to prevent nuclear devastation from ever befalling another city. More than 3/4 of a century after the destruction of Nagasaki, we continue to dwell in the shadow of the mushroom cloud. Prospects for the use of nuclear weapons are as dangerous as at any time since the height of the Cold War. States are racing to create more powerful weapons and broadening the potential scenarios for their use. Warlike rhetoric is turned up to maximum volume while dialogue is on mute. Two recent developments are cause for hope. I welcome the reaffirmation by the United States and the Russian Federation that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought, and their commitment to engage in arms control dialogue. And I congratulate the parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons on that instrument's entry into force. The treaty represents the legitimate fears of many states about the existential danger posed by nuclear weapons. I hope these developments herald a turning point. I call on all parties to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to use the forthcoming 10th Review Conference to reinforce the norm against nuclear weapons and take steps toward their elimination. The United Nations was created to prevent the scourge of war. In fulfillment of that goal, it is incumbent upon all member states to seek the abolition of the most deadly weapons ever created. Together, we must prevent the tragedy of what happened here on August 9, 1945 from ever occurring again. Thank you. August 9, 2021, Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General.
Mr. Nakamura Hodo, Governor of Nagasaki Prefecture. On the occasion of Nagasaki peace ceremony, I offer my heartfelt prayers to the victims of the atomic bombing, together with the residents of Nagasaki Prefecture. On August 9, 1945, a single atomic bomb that exploded over the city of Nagasaki destroyed the city in an instant and deprived so many people of their precious lives. And even those who narrowly escaped death were left with incurable scars on their body and mind and health problems. In the 76 years since then, what was once a ruined city has been reborn as a beautiful city of peace. Through the untiring effort of its people. It is the mission of us Nagasaki residents to protect this peace and make Nagasaki the last place on earth to suffer a nuclear devastation by not allowing the horrors of nuclear weapons to occur for the third time. However, the international community has yet to see a concrete path towards the abolition of nuclear weapons, and nuclear weapons have become an increasingly serious threat to humanity, with different views and the existence of new nuclear risks being pointed out. In January this year, the United States and Russia agreed to extend the New START Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, the only nuclear disarmament treaty left for both countries just before it expired. The first conference of the state parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and the NPT Review Conference are scheduled to be held early next year. In order to ensure a progress toward nuclear abolition, It is important for the countries concerned to engage in dialogues and to act together. Therefore, I would like to ask all the world leaders to visit the sites of atomic bombings and understand the realities of the atomic bombing firsthand, and keep in mind that nuclear weapons are never allowed to be used. I ask the government of Japan, as the only country that has experienced the atomic bombing in war, exercise a strong leadership to realize a world without nuclear weapons by serving as a bridge between countries with differing views. On July 26, Prime Minister Suga made a wise decision not to appeal the Hiroshima High Court's decision on the Black Rain lawsuit in going back to the basic principles of the atomic bomb survivors' relief law. Furthermore, he stated that he intends to expedite the examination aimed at providing relief to those with similar circumstances. I hope the government of Japan will open the way to provide relief to those in Nagasaki who were in similar circumstances as those who were exposed to the Black Rain in Hiroshima. August 9th is an unforgettable day for Nagasaki residents. It is a day of prayer and a day to pledge that we will not allow a nuclear devastation to occur for the third time. I hereby offer my words of prayer to the deceased victims of the atomic bombing and vow to make further efforts towards realizing a peaceful world free of nuclear weapons. Nakamura Hodo, Governor of Nagasaki Prefecture, August 9th, 2021. Telegrams and messages from various sources are posted on the board on the right side of the entrance to the ceremony venue. We invite you to take a look at them.
The chorus, the song Senbazuru, or 1,000 paper cranes, will be now sung by a choral group. This song was composed to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the atomic bombing. The lyrics were written by Yokoyama Kanae, a resident of Chiba Prefecture, who was selected from among the public who contributed their pieces. The music was written by a composer from Nagasaki City, Oshima Michiru. Today, students of Junshin Senior Girls High School, which is Oshima's alma mater, will sing as a choral group. The conductor is their teacher, Matsumoto Kayoko, and they will be accompanied by Uchida Makoto, who has kindly provided music to today's ceremony.
今日の長崎平和宣言を
The Nagasaki Peace Declaration delivered today represents the ardent wish of the people of Nagasaki. With renewed commitment, we will continue to strive for everlasting world peace. Thank you very much for your kind cooperation in ensuring smooth proceeding of today's event. This concludes the 76th Nagasaki Peace Ceremony. Thank you.